Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way is in Training. This is a podcast exploring how warriors should train and fight, as well as how they should live. We will talk about technique, but we'll also dive deep into fitness, mindset, and strategy. We will explore leadership and philosophy as well. So whether you are a young soldier, a veteran police officer, a responsible armed citizen, or simply someone looking for an authentic life, let's examine how the lessons of combat and preparation for it can help us fulfill our potential. Let's explore the way together and learn how the discipline of training can show us our true selves amidst the chaos of life. Hey everybody, welcome back. On this episode, I've got my friend Karl Rhen. Karl runs an excellent training center here just outside of Austin. Phenomenal place. A lot of good instructors come there. He puts on a lot of good classes himself. He's been very heavily involved and has been a source of knowledge in both the competition and defensive shooting communities for a long time. So real quick, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Karl?
Okay. Let's see, the shortest version of it, I started teaching people in 1991. So I've been teaching for 34 years now. We have a permanent training facility. It's outside of Austin. We run classes basically about 40 weeks a year. I used to travel some as a trainer. Mostly now I'm staying close to home because it's more convenient and I've got a nice range, and I bring people into me. People that want to train with me come see me. And I don't know, I've got 3,000 something hours of training and, shot competition, nationals level, grandmaster level, all that stuff. I'm not really shooting competition much anymore. I'm busy every weekend teaching people. Been on a bunch of podcasts, written some books, been an instructor at the Range Master Tactical Conference for the last 24 years. Gosh, I don't know. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm a Texas law enforcement certified instructor, was a DHS instructor. Just done a lot of stuff. I have a training team, about a dozen people, and we teach a lot of classes here in the local area. Our format is different from a traveling trainer format. We do a lot of 4-hour courses because they're a lot more affordable and a lot more accessible to a lot of people. And I guess that's what I'm most known for, is sort of now what's called the gateway instructor. I was a gateway instructor before anybody called it gateway instructor. And it's all about trying to get more than the 1% of highly motivated gun-obsessed hobbyists, trying to get the rest of those people, the people that take the carry permit class and don't do anything else. My focus is mostly on trying to get those people to get better and more training so that they don't end up making mistakes that could cost them their lives or life in jail or any kind of major trauma. And it's not the most popular thing to do. It's not as cool as being a high performance pistol instructor that spends all my time, making videos on the internet. I spend most of my time on the range teaching. And so I don't have a giant social media presence like a lot of folks do. Spend, 150 days on the year actually teaching people. So it's just, I'm an anachronism, out of sync with the modern world, I guess, on that front. But I'm kind of like the Keith Richards of the training industry. I just keep doing what I've been doing for a long time, and people that like it seem to come around and find me and come train with me.
And you've got like a progression set up with the 4-hour classes, right? Where people can kind of go through a progression and get to like different skill levels. I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah, I'm old school like that. Back in the old days, everybody had a 40-hour program. Rogers, Thunder Ranch, Gunsight, Ayub, all those different people. And it used to be the training model. Let me go a side note here. I'm a student of the history of handgun training, and I teach classes on the history of handgun training. And it's one of the 3 least popular topics that people that go to a lot of classes like. They don't want medical training, they don't want force on force scenarios, and they sure don't want to know about the history of handgun training. Naturally, those are two of the 3 of those things are topics I'm very passionate about and think people should take training in. Back to the main topic. So Gunsight 250 was like the original firearms training course back in the late 70s. It's a 40-hour class. It teaches you mostly everything that you need to know to be a well-prepared handgunner. Your typical law enforcement training academy puts 40 to 60 hours in on firearms. And so it's not the 16-hour 2-day weekend class model that's the dominant thought behind all this stuff. It's the 40-hour model, like Gunsight and Thunder Ranch and Ayub and some of the other classic schools. We have both a written test and a shooting test you have to pass to get through our 40-hour program. The only difference between me and those other folks is I don't offer it as a 5-day continuous block. I offer it essentially as 10 4-hour classes broken up into chunks. Modern adult learning theory says that that's actually better for people.
Yes.
So and one thing that we do on the handgun skills part of it is you have to pass each 4-hour chunk before you can progress. So you don't just come and do 40 hours and at the end of it, hang on and try to pass the highest level test. We have interim tests built into the program. So, the 40-hour program includes force on force scenarios. It includes red gun tactics training, shooting on the move, shooting at low light, practice with pepper spray, interaction with live role players, decision-making drills, as also all the standard stuff: draw from the holster, shoot from concealment, shoot from cover, right? Do your speed reloads and clear your malfunctions, and learn to shoot with the gun in both hands, right hand, left hand only, all that stuff, and all the traditional handgun training. So it's all of the comprehensive set of skills that people should have to be well prepared to carry and defend themselves and deal with all the issues that come after that.
See, I really like that, because one of the problems I see going on in the defensive shooting trainee world is there are a lot of people that they'll go to 4 to 6 weekend classes a year, the 16-hour classes, which is great, but then they don't really have any sort of regimented program in between. That is their training. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I always thought, if I had a facility like yours, I think I would be more in line with your thinking on it, where it's almost like a dojo model. You know what I mean? It's almost like going to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or any other martial art, where you have a progression and you have modules you have to get through, and ranks you have to pass through to get to the final step, and just this kind of progressive learning. And I think that that's something that's lacking a lot in the civilian defensive shooting world. The competitive side is a bit different, because they focus on just the performance shooting aspect of it, and they train like athletes, right? But if we could get kind of the best of both worlds, I think the people would be better off. Am I articulating that well enough? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's part of the thing, that there's such a widening gap between the defensive shooting community and the competition shooting community, because the competition shooting community, and I hate to sound like an old FUD, and I'm not technically a FUD because I'm Gen X, but I definitely have FUD tendencies in that regard, that there's a subset of the gun culture who are online all the time, and they only care about the sub 1 second draw and the 2 second bill drill. And that's the sole measure of value of someone as a shooter. In the real world, the ability to not shoot, the ability to avoid situations, and more importantly, I think there's some real innovators right now, particularly John Rhen and John Holshin, Dustin Solomon. I just bought a neuro device the other day, and we're going to start using it. Okay. John Holshin's coming to my place in September for probably the most innovative class that's offered right now.
When is John going to be there?
Mid-September. He's coming in for a 2-day course, and he uses the neuro device, and the whole point to that is visual stimulus as opposed to audible stimulus, which surprisingly slows people down quite a bit. And the neuro devices project laser dots or images, little outline images on the targets. And a typical kind of Holshin drill is you have 3 targets in front of you. And an unknown time, one of them will have a gun drawn on it with a laser. That's the one that you draw and shoot. You continue shooting that target until the gun image goes away. But while you are doing that, it's possible that one or both of the other 2 targets will also have the image of a gun come up. And when it gets more complicated, for example, the one on the left may have a gun, the one in the middle is a no-shoot, and the one on the right has a gun. And when you transition across the no-shoot, you're not allowed to muzzle the no-shoot, right? Which one glaring flaw in competition is there is no penalty for muzzling a no shoot. When in the real world, and this is a side effect of kind of the offshoot of law enforcement and military people getting involved in training, their background having qualified immunity, they can point their guns everywhere at everybody all the time with basically no punishment, which leads to, armed citizen training in which we never worry about muzzle direction. We never worry about if we're teaching building search or room clearing or whatever you want to call it, that instructors will just let students point their guns at all the no shoots, right? And during drills, instead of muzzle aversion on a no shoot, they're all obsessed with speed. And so, well, it's faster to muzzle the no shoot as I move across from target 1 to target 3. I'm not sure those are good skills that we want to habituate and automate as much as we want to have skills that are applicable when there's live people out there in front of the muzzle. And so, it doesn't look as cool on YouTube if you're averting your muzzle when you move from one target to the next to avoid muzzling a no shoot, but that's probably the skill that you need to be practicing. And so right now, like I said, John Rhen has his own system. Holshin has a neuro system. Those guys travel a little. They don't travel a lot because the hardware involved in using those systems, it's significant, right? It takes a trailer full of gear. It takes multiple instructors to run multiple stations. It takes, $10,000 worth of neuro devices to do what Holshin does. So it's not like he's getting rich running 24 people at a time with one instructor the way, other trainers will do. It's a different approach, smaller groups, more individual training and more challenging instruction. And so I'm much more into that, thinking that's the real value that people need, that it's not purely motivated toward what looks good on social media or even, shooting matches, running around, shooting 2 rounds at every target and moving on. I'm not sure it's fun. It's a fun game. And I've did it for a long time and still do it occasionally. But for the average person, if they're going to put their effort into things. But here's the issue, and I'll just be blunt and unpopular when I say it. The vast majority of gun hobbyists don't carry regularly. They leave their guns in the car. They come to a match. They take off their tiny little pocket carry gun. They put on their $3,000 gamer gun. They shoot the match. They incorrectly infer that skill with the $3,000 gamer gun with the 2-pound trigger will translate to the 38 snub or the micro 380 in their pocket. I'm, as far as I know, the only trainer in the country that runs a small gun class where we actually compare that performance and measure it. And we measure it against a rigid standard of this is good enough based on our own analysis of what's good for gunfight preparation or for self-defense preparation. And we also measure the delta between the open carry gamer gun from the gamer holster and the gun that you actually carry when you go to dinner, because I think it's really important. Everyone wants to assume that there's no loss of skill, but we've measured it. I've written about it multiple times. I've presented on it, and it's just not a priority for people because for many of them, weekend warrior gun classes is just a recreational activity, no different from, golf or boating or tennis or whatever, pickleball, right? And so it's a difference in mindset that what are you spending your time developing skills for and why do you need them?
So I've got a few thoughts here. And one is I need to get with you about the dates on John's class because I haven't seen him in years. And I actually went to Iraq with John. I like John a lot. So I would love to take that class. And
John's another guy that's not internet famous. He's like me. He owns an indoor range up in Everett, Washington. He teaches all the time up there, local student base. And he doesn't spend a lot of time generating social media content, and he's not a person who gets involved in online controversies to attract more attention to himself. He's a very quiet professional with a mountain of experience who just goes along and does his classes, and people that are looking for good training seem to find him. But like I said, he's not out there on the road trying to teach 40 road classes a year. It's a big deal for him to leave the indoor range and go on the road to teach. And he does a handful. I think he does 6 a year or something. He's been on. You should get him as a podcast guest and talk to him about that.
I think I sent John a message. I don't think I have him scheduled yet, but I believe I talked to him about it and he wanted to do it. Like I said, I like John a lot. It's been a few years, but I have fond memories of meeting him in Iraq in 2004. He's a good dude. He really is. And so another thought I had, because I come very much from the military law enforcement background you were talking about, is I will be straight up and totally candid that I don't even think about muzzling no shoots, as long as I don't shoot them. It's just the way I did things for so many decades. So I do a little evaluation of that myself and think about how I teach civilians a little bit, I think. And not so much from a performance background, but in the application background.
I'll give you two examples that matter. One, we had a student involved in a shooting where he shot a neighbor's dog. In retrospect, I would have advised him not to have done that, but he did. And the secondary problem was he had his gun in his hand when the angry neighbor came out into the street to confront him about having shot the dog, and he muzzled the neighbor. And when the police showed up, that he was charged with aggravated assault because he had muzzled his neighbor. Neighbor said, when you're the police officer and you show up on the scene and someone says, he pointed his gun at me, then that goes in the file. And more recently, I worked as an expert witness on a case for a gentleman in Houston who had unknown individuals jump his back fence in the middle of the afternoon. And his response, again, not what I would have advised him to do, but his response was to dash out his back door into his backyard, pointing his gun at all four of these people. And it turned out that they were poorly identified, non-English speaking workers of a company that was stringing fiber through his neighborhood. But before this was all sorted out, the Houston police officer arrested him for aggravated assault, second-degree felony. And he ended up suing civilly the company that hired the workers because they placed him in a situation. Bottom line, this guy ended up with an aggravated assault arrest on his record. And even though the charges were dropped and he was never convicted, it never even went to the grand jury. It was dropped. The case was completely dropped. But on his record, when they do a background check, it shows up that he was arrested for aggravated assault, and it impacted his ability to find employment.
Yeah.
And so I think, a lot of there's people out there on the internet that I won't train with anybody that wasn't special forces or SWAT. I don't want to train with, anybody else. Well, some of those guys, John Holshin being a great example, John Rhen being another great example, Tom Givens being a great example. I could, name dozens of others. Masada Ayub, a guy who did law enforcement work for years and years. There are people that have that background that can and do translate their training appropriate for the armed citizen mission. And some, they're like, well, just bring your plate carrier and your battle belt and we'll have gun fun for a weekend. And then, like I said, the students go to leave for the day and they put their Ruger LCP in their jeans pocket. And it's like, okay, that was fun, but does any of that really apply? And again, this is probably why I'm not as famous or as popular as others on the internet, because I don't serve the battle belt, plate carrier, carbine. Our rifle classes and shotgun classes are home defense oriented. They are home and ranch oriented courses, and not you're in the middle of an urban riot with your plate carrier and your slung AR at some political event. And I've no apologies for that. I've no regrets, as the tattoo says, that we're just trying to do what we think is the right training for the right audience.
Well, and I think that matters too. I mean, it's something that I've thought a lot myself, because like I don't teach CQB to civilians. I'll do CQB for law enforcement, right? And it's got nothing to do with whether civilians have the right to learn CQB. I have nothing against that. Like that's not the issue for me. The issue for me is, unless there's a significant social upheaval event that's ongoing, there's no reason you're ever going to use those tactics. Those tactics are for assaulting a structure with a team of armed individuals to either capture or kill someone inside. Like that's what that's for, right?
Right.
Whereas a civilian needs to know how to defend their home, which is a very different set of tactics. I mean, obviously a lot of the principles overlap, of course, and the hard skills of shooting the gun overlap, but you're not moving through a structure in 4-man cells in a 12-man team. Typically as a civilian, you're defending your home or you're caught up in something at the food court, like the cliche goes, right?
Right.
And it's a different set of rules.
I do all the training for armed teachers for our county, of the rural county that I live in. I've trained all the armed teachers for all the schools. And the state of Texas, DPS, has a armed teacher training course that covers some of that, because the armed teachers are either doing one of two things. They are either in the classroom and they're defending against someone trying to get into the classroom, in which case they have to deal with they need to understand some CQB concepts so they understand how they can exploit them to their benefit against someone coming through the door. But then there are individuals, there are principals, football coaches, band directors, school maintenance people who are the armed people, and they may be going to the threat. And in some cases, there may be two of them working together. So we teach a team tactics course. We cover 2-person movement. I have a 2-person team tactics class that includes both you're armed and another person is armed, or you're armed and the person that's with you is unarmed, because that's often a husband, wife, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, or with children in tow. There's some team tactics stuff that people need to know. It's different from the application that you're talking about. The principles are the same. So I think people need to know it, but they need to learn it in context. When we do our force-on-force scenarios, we'll do scenarios where you're in your bedroom and some family member is up in the kitchen and someone gets in the house and they're in the kitchen, they're unarmed against a potentially armed threat who's holding them at gunpoint, trying to get them to take them somewhere. They've got a knife. They're trying to grab them and take them outside the house, whatever. Then the armed person has to do armed movement in structures, but they have to do it not the way you would search a building in response to a burglar alarm call, but very dynamic. And I need to move smartly to the problem as quickly as possible, but I still can't just run blindly down the hallway. And so there's context, there's applications, real world applications for some of these skills, but they have to be taught in context. And some people do a great job with it and some people don't. And in certain cases, old techniques that were taught at some of the big schools were all focused on it's okay to muzzle no shoots. But I'll throw a thing to Claude Werner. If your listeners aren't aware of Claude Werner, Claude was an Army Ranger. He's a military intelligence officer. He worked for the Rogers Shooting School for many years. Claude has a fantastic book called Serious Mistakes Gun Owners Make. And if you look at the mistakes that gun owners make, those that aren't related to safety and safe gun handling are almost always related to decision making with the firearm, including mistake of fact, shooting someone that they shouldn't have shot because they pointed their gun at them when they had no reason to.
Yeah.
And often that's family members in a intruder in the house situation, right? Very common. Then again, another thing that I guess I'm out of sync with the industry is everybody says, oh, you need a light on your carry pistol because you just never know. I will tell you that I don't think I've had a single student in the last decade go through my low light shoot house with a light on their gun that didn't muzzle a no shoot, because the instinct we have when we put the light on the pistol is to forget that the flashlight is a loaded gun and just point the gun at everything we're trying to look at. And again, that's a skill that has to be practiced and developed. And 99% of the people that are running around with lights on their carry guns because they saw monkey see, monkey do on the internet and all the cool influencers that I see are running lights on their guns, most of those people have never taken a low light class or a building search class. And so there's so much monkey see, monkey do going on and it's good for equipment sales, and it's good for holster sales. And when you put the heavy light on the front of your gun, it keeps your muzzle down, which helps you get your 2-second bill drill. So without context, I think people get wrapped up in things that they think, well, I'm supposed to do this because all the people that I pay attention to are doing this. But nobody asks the question, why are you doing this? And what are the negative consequences of doing this? And again, I don't go online and stir up a bunch of controversy. I just kind of go along and do my own thing. But often when students come in and they've spent a lot of time graduating from YouTube University, sometimes I have to do some deprogramming and explain, well, here's why I don't do those things. And here's why I don't have a light on my pistol. Why I spend all my time low light training focusing on the handheld flashlight. And yeah, shooting one-handed with a flashlight in your hand is harder. And it's not as much fun. However, it's more likely should I actually be doing those things.
I did a lot of work years ago with Ken Good on low light. And there was a really heavy focus on flashlight in the support hand, even with a weapon mounted light. And that has kind of stuck with me to this day. You know, Ken and I are still friends, and we don't always 100% agree on everything as far as, you know, tactics and techniques go, but he's got some really solid, sound doctrine on low light use and all of that. And
I was aware of the stuff they were doing with the low light training. I had a friend of mine who was on the Austin SWAT team. He went out and took a 5-day class from Ken, and he shared some of the information with me when he got back. I never got to train with him, train with Ken personally. But yeah, I mean, my scenario, the one I tell students to be prepared of, you know, number one, they're like, well, somebody breaks in my house, I'm going to skulk around the house with a flashlight. And the very first thing we do is we get red guns out in the low light class, and I put them in one room, and then somebody else coming down the hall with a flashlight. I'm like, can you tell that person is coming because they're turning the flashlight off and on, and they're doing all the tactical Timmy stuff, the splash lighting and all that? I'm like, yeah, I can see a light turning off and on. I know somebody's coming down the hall. So how stealthy is that, right? Why not just turn on the lights in your house? You don't need to have these tactical flashlight techniques. The situation that's going to happen to you is you're going to be in a parking lot at night, and you're going to need to see what's going on around you because the lights in the parking lot went out for whatever reason, and you've got the flashlight in your hand, and you need to look around at what's going on. That's why you need to be able to draw your pistol with your dominant hand to keep your flashlight in your non-dominant hand. And then we talk about, well, what if I've got a light on my gun? Well, okay, I've got a flashlight in my hand. Am I going to drop the flashlight to draw my gun so that I can shoot two-handed using the light on my gun? Okay, now the gunfight's over. Now what am I doing? I got to look around on the ground and try to find my flashlight. The police show up, and the only way I can have a flashlight on is to leave my gun in my hand. That doesn't sound good. So when you try to work through real situations in full context, as opposed to the shallow answers that the general population, the average person that's put a light on their pistol, they're like, well, better to have it and then not need it than to need it and not have it. It's like, okay, well, that's a cute phrase, you know, but it's like, okay, explain to me, give me a real life situation that you can envision yourself using your weapon mounted light. And in many cases, it involves having a gun in their hand, not because they need a gun in their hand, but because they need a flashlight in their hand. But because they have the flashlight on the gun, they're drawing the gun. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And I'm kind of like, on a work gun, you absolutely need a light, 100%. I'm kind of agnostic on the carry gun. Sometimes I'll carry a gun with a flashlight, sometimes I won't. My most typical carry does not have a weapon mounted light, you know, and I've always got a flashlight in my pocket.
Yeah.
Right. And I just think that that's like, having the weapon mounted light does not negate the need for the handgun.
Right.
Having the handheld light is usually enough to handle anything you're going to run into as a civilian in that context, and makes sense for a lot of the same reasons you said. Having said that, a lot of times when I carry my full size guns, I'll have a light on. But yeah. I'm also really used to running that in the handheld light.
Sure.
I'm used to doing it. It's kind of a different background for me, so the context is a bit different. But
right. Well, I would go back to data sets. Go back to Tom Givens. You know, he's had 73 students involved in real life shootings. The number that needed a flashlight, 0.
Yep.
You look at, and I know that the way the data set exists is because those are places that have video cameras, but you look at active self-protection and John Correa's library of shooting videos, and do we see very many of those in which a light on the gun was used, needed, or made a difference in the outcome? And I would say generally no. And so again, we start looking at what's the need, how important is this? It's like being able to reload quickly. It's a wonderful skill. If 0 of Tom's 73 shootings in actual real life required a reload, then and less than 10 of 50,000 in the ASP library, it's like, and I love the Rogers School, right? I've been to the Rogers School. They spend 25% of their time teaching people to shoot left hand only if they're right-handers. Again, we're talking about a skill that's extremely marginal for requirements. But back in the day when the program was developed, I think there was thought that it was more useful or more needed than it is. After a while, you get down into the weeds with the gun skills and I need to learn how to reload my gun left hand only or right hand only. And it's good to learn how to do those things, but how important is it relative to the likely use case compared to being better at tactics, decision-making, and communication, which those classes, ask anyone that offers that kind of training, those classes don't sell the way that 1,000 round, 2,000 round, stand in one spot and shoot till you're knee deep in brass classes do. So what people need and what they want are often not the same.
Yep. So a couple thoughts. One is, this is my carry for the day. When I'm carrying something that's truly compact, I usually don't have a light on it.
Right.
I have a thought. I want to hear your thoughts on this. So, and this depends on how far people want to go down with that, right? And you always have to, I think you have to look at that when you talk about, how people should prioritize training, what they should do, because some people are going to put a huge amount of effort in, far above and beyond what they actually need to be confident enough for those self-defense situations, because they like
I did.
Right?
I spent my first 15 years as a student of the gun doing nothing but chasing the timer and the scorecard and focused on all of those things. And unfortunately, I think everybody has to get that out of their system. They have to climb that mountain and do all that, and probably get to the point that they realize that unless I quit my job and train like a professional athlete, that I'll top out on my skills and can't get that last 1/10 of a second or 2/10 of a second, or if I don't change my equipment, that you get to a point where you're going to plateau after you put all that work in. And some people then are happy and they sit on the plateau and they don't look for anything else. And others just kind of say, well, that was fun. I'll go do something else now. I'm going to go shoot sporting clays.
So my thought on one-handed shooting is that if you're truly chasing performance shooting, there are benefits from shooting one-handed to carry over to shooting freestyle. Mm-hmm. And there's a value in that, right? But it's kind of the Pareto principle combined with your level of participation, right? Like if you have the time to chase those things, that's great, but not everybody does. And some people need to organize their training in a way that is realistic for their level of participation, and that's okay. I honestly think that for the most part, using a USPSA analogy, getting to be about a B-class shooter and being good at all the other stuff too is plenty good enough for anything you'll ever encounter, without a doubt.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's not saying don't chase it further if you want to. More skill is never a bad thing, but it becomes a huge expense in both time and money, ammo, equipment, all of that. Keep chasing much, much past that. And I enjoyed it, and I know you enjoyed it, but it's not necessary, I think, for the average person. Unless they wanted to. If they want to do it, that's great. But if they can defend themselves without
Yeah, and I would say a weakness in my own resume, despite having done a lot of weekend seminar type classes in it, is the combative side of it. And I'm more interested in that now than I was. Not the let's get on the ground and wrestle around so much as the stand up for disengagement and understanding, most importantly, understanding the risks that you get into when someone is within like 5 feet,
Oh yeah, yeah.
right?
And I was always very heavy into that side of things, and actually, until I started shooting USPSA, I was far heavier on that side of things than I was. Not that I didn't shoot a lot,
Right.
but I would say if you had to pick which one I was more into at the time, it was the combative side. And I think
Yeah.
that's something a lot of people neglect. The gun doesn't always solve the problem. And even more importantly, the gun doesn't always solve the problem by itself. It's not an either or. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not like it's always a pure combative problem or a pure shooting problem. Sometimes it's mixed.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I love about the Range Master Tactical Conference is Tom always brings in combatives instructors. There's Cecil Birch and Craig Douglas and Chris Fry and Guy Schnitzler, and I'm forgetting people, and I apologize if I didn't name you, but there's Larry Lindemann. That's another one I was thinking, right? And I just hosted a 5-day Masad Ayub class, the MAG 80, which is his second level course, and we spent probably 40% of that class working handgun retention and disarm skills, which is more time than I've spent on that topic in the last 10 years. That the MAG 80 class, people always think of Mass as a shooter, but I mean, he was writing for Black Belt magazine in the 70s and has a pretty good background in the unarmed stuff as well, as long as particularly related to police work and that sort of thing. And we spent a lot of time on that. And I liked that because instead of 2 days and then you forget everything, we revisited the techniques like every day for 5 days. And it's not that we really did different stuff. It was, you need to remember what to do. The problem initially, day one, everybody's like, how am I going to remember all these, 16 different techniques and which one to do in what situation? But the way the training was presented, by the 5th day, there was more stickiness to the material, that you weren't adding more techniques. It was, okay, now these 3 techniques all use the same basic principles. So now that becomes one thing. And these 5 techniques all use the same principle. So now it really came down to maybe 3 different concepts that you had to remember. And it got easier as the week went on to see the common factors and to see, okay, I need to do this type of thing in this situation. And so I saw a lot of people in class get better at that. And that sort of goes back to, again, the Dustin Solomon approach and the what Lee Weems talks about a lot, the chunking and the interleaving and trying to retain it. Because there are some studies that have been done on police training to say that intense training for 40 hours, what do they retain in a year? Right. And that's other thing I see that's kind of wrong with the modern training industry is everybody wants the new thing. They won't repeat a class. The only people I see doing that are Craig Douglas's students who will take the ECQC class multiple times. I've taken it 3 times. I know people that have taken that class 9 times because they use it as an annual refresher. That's what I do with my students. We offer half price refresher training. Come retake any class you took from us for half price to revisit those skills and get more practice in on those skills. And I think to a certain degree, a lot of people that are the weekend warrior training junkies, they're always looking for, well, I haven't taken this and I haven't taken that. And maybe the question should be, well, was that other class valuable enough to me that I need to make sure I retain those skills? We often don't test our retention of material that's a year old or 10 years old. And there's just not that much of this stuff. People make a big deal like there's a million different things to learn. I really don't think there is. There's a handful of things that you need to be able to do on demand and perform well. My friend Paul Martin, who's a preparedness guru, Paul teaches some preparedness classes for us. His tagline, is perform the basics well.
Yeah, well, that's mastery of everything, right?
Yeah,
doing the basics well is
It's not cool, and it doesn't scratch our itch to, I want to learn something different and exciting. It's learned something new. But if you go back to why am I doing this, I need to be good at these 3 or 4 things. And just because you were good at the 3 or 4 things at the end of a 2-day class 2 years ago, it doesn't necessarily mean you retained it. Doesn't necessarily mean that you really have it under your fingers. So it's again, an unpopular idea, out of sync with modern marketing trends for training.
Well, and I think that goes back to something we were talking about earlier, where, I mean, really, when you get right down to it, your training isn't the 2-day class. That's like a special event in your training program. That's not your training program. Your training program is what you get up and do regularly, every week, maybe every day if you're really into it. What are you doing to continually develop these skills and reinforce things, to work on things, as opposed to basically being exposed to something and then setting it aside and thinking you still got it.
Aside from people who shoot competition, the vast majority of students of 2-day weekend classes don't have a training program. They don't hold themselves to standards. When they practice, they don't train against standards. There's a small number of people. Tom Gibbons said once that there was maybe 10,000 people that keep the entire private sector training industry alive out of millions, tens of millions of gun owners. And I don't know how to change that necessarily, although I've tried with my idea with the shorter courses and trying to get people to come more frequently for shorter classes. But the many trainers that do the traveling courses are great about recommending, here, continue practicing and work to achieve this standard. Gabe White with the turbo pen tests. There's only 4 tests. It's like 25 rounds worth of shooting, and you can go to the range and work on any one of those tests to get better at them and get faster and get all your hits and everything. And for a basic level shooter, just going to the range and working those 4 tests until you can shoot dark or light pin skills, I mean, that could be a year's worth of training program. But most ranges don't let people use timers. Most ranges don't let people use holsters. Most ranges won't let people shoot fast enough to run those tests at a light pin level. So it's a challenge. I know you've been involved with the ACE virtual reality. Zoe, who teaches for me, is doing a lot of ACE. I'm terrible to admit I have an ACE system, and I have yet to plug it in and turn it on, and I've had it for 6 months because I've spent all my time doing stuff in the non-virtual world. But I see the value in it, and anything that motivates people, dry fire magazines and cool fire guns and mantises and SIRT pistols and all those things. That's, for people to have a regular training program, that stuff really becomes essential. And not everyone's willing to invest, $200 for a SIRT pistol, or the cost of a mantis, or the cost of a $100 dry fire magazine, or, God forbid, $1,000 to get into the ACE plus the annual membership, right? It's hard to get motivated to do those things when what you really want to do is just go to the range and shoot guns and have noise and smoke and recoil and have fun.
Yeah, and I think too that people, and this is one of my other pet peeves, and I think there's another value in the way you organize the training, is people don't really template out their training like athletes program out their training cycles.
No.
They just they look at some cool drills on YouTube or Instagram, and they just get a collection of them and go to the range and shoot those drills rather than pick a drill based on trying to create a specific training effect. Because of what I need to be looking at right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they do bill drills to work on the bill drill, instead of doing a bill drill to work on grip on the draw, or doing a bill drill to work on sight tracking, or perceptual speed. All the things you can use a bill drill for that aren't just to get better at bill drills.
Right. And that's where I think to praise, Holshin and Rhen, with them inserting visual information that has to be processed after the gun is out and the shots are being fired. I think that is really the next, new thing. And Holshin presented some data. I got invited to teach with him. Andy Stanford put together a training conference at Tactical Response back in January, and Dustin Solomon and Rhen and Holshin were all there. I was there, and Holshin presented his data from the classes. One thing about the Neuro device is that it records, it's a shot timer that you can have the laser images appear and disappear, so you can track how long did it take someone to stop shooting after the gun image went away on the target. So imagine a bill drill where you don't know whether it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 rounds, and you, between each shot, you have to take an instant of time to visually assess the target and determine, do I need to shoot again? Well, now you're not seeing 0.2 or 0.15 splits, you're seeing 0.4 or 0.5 splits, because when you add the extra task of not just blindly, I'm going to draw my gun and pull the trigger as fast as I can and watch the dot bounce around, right? Now it's like shoot, assess, shoot, assess, shoot, assess. John says with repetition in his study group up in Washington, people can get faster at that, but it's a skill that requires development. And unless you practice that particular skill, you don't develop it. So
Yes.
people that are, he's had many people come to his class, they're like, I got a 2-second bill drill. Okay, we'll try this. And they don't have 20 splits and they don't have a 1-second draw when the start is surprise visual and it's not standby with a somewhat known pause length between the standby command and the buzzer, or when you hit the button on the delay on your timer. We get habituated to certain things, and you know, people with 1-second draws on the internet sometimes, I think, get habituated to the time delay between when they press the button and the buzzer goes off. And if you look at how quickly they're starting, in some cases, you might find that they're not actually reacting to the buzzer as much as predicting, oh, the buzzer's about to go, and I can start moving my hand. Does it make sense?
It does. It does. I definitely think there's an element to that. And there's also an element of, like, here's an example. So one year at a recent USPSA Nationals, like maybe last year's or year before, they had the second year of like Isaac Lockwood's Bill Drill competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a side match where you paid to do your chances. You had multiple attempts, right? And you know, lots of people are getting Bill Drills well below 2 seconds. Like,
yeah,
well below. Like, and Isaac Lockwood and a couple other guys are pushing like well over, right? Which is insane. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
But then they also had a Bill Drill stage in the match. And I'm not 100% sure on this, but if I remember right, and there wasn't many more than this, if I'm wrong, if I remember right, there's only one performance on the Bill Drill stage that was under 2 seconds.
Oh, sure.
Because it was in the context of the match. Now the consequences were different for throwing a bad run or having a mic, right?
Correct.
So it changes everything. And that's kind of the same thing with a lot of this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm not disparaging the training value of a fast bill drill. Like, it's got training value, absolutely. Yeah. But you have to put that in the context of what am I trying to achieve and what's the actual application look like, which is very different. You know, it is not going to be the same manufacturing decision making and all the other things go. It's just not.
Right.
Now, the faster you can get at the pure, you know, speed and accuracy piece of it, the faster you'll be when you degrade in the application. But your performance is still going to degrade in the application. It needs to be understood. And like I've thought about this a lot, right, for several years now. Based on a conversation I had with a friend of mine who's also, you know, a firearms trainer, has been in gunfights, is a solid guy, right? And in the real world, I think that if you're splitting at like 0.2 to 0.3, you better be very well trained with decision making. That's actually very fast for the real world.
That's what Holston's data showed, that if you're actually having to decide between shots, do I need to pull the trigger again? That 0.3 he considered to be outstanding.
Yeah.
And that were people that were training with the neuro system on a weekly basis to develop that skill.
Yeah, and it's people, like if I'm doing a full speed bill drill, it's like how you can't, you know how sometimes you can't fix something in a bill drill? Like you're doing predictive shooting. You're not going to be aligning the sights and like refining.
You just commit. You commit. The gun's coming out. My finger's going bang, 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 bang.
Yep.
And
if the grip's off, it's off, and they're going to be Charlies. Like that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I do a lot of stuff where I work on, especially like in my applications classes, where I work on getting a Charlie or better on the first round, and then driving them to that high center chest. And that I think is a pretty realistic application for build drill as an engagement sequence, not as a skill development. You know what I mean? And I think people, it's like martial arts, right? Like a lot of, like I grew up with very traditional martial arts. There wasn't an MMA yet. There wasn't, UFC yet, right?
Right.
And one of the biggest weaknesses of traditional martial arts is people confusing the medium for the message. And I think we're starting to see some of that. And I'm very happy that competition style training is more popular in the tactical world because it has more benefits than drawbacks if it's looked at the right way. But you have to understand that the medium is not the message. The things you do in training aren't the things you necessarily do in application. Like I'll make an example for the competitive side of things, right? So a Blake drill. The whole point of a Blake drill is to drive down my transition speed.
Right.
So if I'm practicing with the Blake drill the right way, it's an artificial pace. I'm trying to keep that metronome pace and just make the gun ready for that pace.
Yes.
But even in a match, if I see an array of 3 targets, that shouldn't be the way I shoot. No matter how hosel they are, I should be responding to the visual stimulus so that I shoot at the right time in the right place. You see what I mean? Whereas in the Blake drill, like I want to know what my sights were doing, but I want to be shooting at the same time as a split no matter what, because that's what I'm trying to fix. I'm trying to make myself be in the right place at that time.
Right.
And it's too, like, that's not the way you shoot for application at all, but it's a great training tool. And I think people don't understand the difference sometimes between training and application.
Well, it's they're looking at what are the people that they're paying attention to doing, right? And the information, there's people that are doing higher level stuff that aren't as active on social media. They don't put out as many videos. And so for those that are getting all their information, I mean, essentially YouTube is the gun magazines of the 80s and 90s, right? We all used to go to the grocery store and we buy all the gun magazines and we read all the articles, and 10% of the articles were good and the rest of them were whatever, and they were entertaining and interesting. Oh, here's some new gun. Here's another new gun. Here's another new scope, right? That's what YouTube is. And it's the same thing with the quality. 10% of it is great. And 90% of it is just, let me fill up some airtime to get you to look at it, to look at the ad that gets me paid, that sort of thing. It's the same as the gun magazines. We don't want you to look at the article because the ads on the page with the article pay for the article. And that's just the way things are. That's not going to change. No, but the thought I had about the build drill is really what you want is some sort of anatomical target that's 3D, that when you start shooting it, it turns in reaction to you shooting it. And your 6-shot build drill is happening while the target is pivoting away from you and falling. And if you did that, then it's not going to be bam, 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 bam. If you're trying to get all 6 shots on it, as the target begins moving and begins falling and crumpling, then the cadence is really going to look like, bam, 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 if we're still trying to get all 6 shots off, because the target movement and the changing of the zone that we're trying to hit is going to occur. That's where I think something like the ACE simulator has tremendous potential, because the mechanical, people have been trying for 100 years to come up with mechanical things that do that. And, if you're not aware of the tactical anatomy movement, Troy Miller and Lee Weems and Dr. James Williams and John Rhen, several other guys, they're doing these classes where they specialize in 3D shooting, right? Yeah. Where you have 3D targets and you're paying attention to where are the vital organs, and we shoot from not just perfectly, all the training we do is all squared away, facing a neatly squared on 2-dimensional cardboard target that doesn't turn or flinch or move or anything. And as you told me once, meat moves when you shoot it, right? That the idea with those courses is they're getting people to think, okay, if the person's turned quarter, 45 degrees left, 45 degrees right, 90 degrees left or right, understanding where to aim. Essentially, where my wife and I are going to South Africa in June for a little low-end safari shooting, cull animals and stuff. We're not going for lions and tigers and bears, but there's a great book called The Perfect Shot that it's a like 200-page book that is nothing but teaching you where to aim on various game animals in Africa based on where their vital organs are. There are companies that sell targets that are two-sided. One side has the image of the animal, and the other side has like the X-ray vision of their organs, right? And that sort of thought, that's the Tactical Anatomy program, the Tactical Anatomy Summit, and the shooting with X-ray vision, and some of the stuff that's out there in the training world. Again, should be more popular than it is, but it's not a performance class where you're trying to rattle off 6 shots as fast as you can. It's, from this angle, you got to make 2 good shots, and you've got to put it into the heart when the person's not neatly squared up to you, and your target zone is 3 inches as opposed to 8.5 by 11 or 8-inch circle or whatever. That's another thing I think is useful in the modern training industry, more informative, more challenging, and shooting smaller targets that are moving, far more challenging than shooting the standing still targets. But the logistics of it make it hard to run for people that want to run long, large firing lines with lots of people on a square range. The logistics of that become difficult, and it's less profitable for trainers and requires a lot more hardware. So they're less likely to do it than they are to do the easy course.
And that brings me up to another thought too, is people who don't understand how gunshots work. And and hunters probably have a more basic understanding of this than people have it for sure.
Yeah.
But to sound really cliche, the deer's not shooting back, right? So
correct.
When you're shooting in a gunfight, like, it's entirely possible you may have killed that offender. Like, he is dead and just doesn't know it yet. And if you're not careful, he can get a shot off and take you out as well. Like, that's just the reality of it. And people don't think about it. They're like, okay, well, I put 2 in the heart, I'm good. Well, you could be. Or the guy might fight for 2 more minutes until there's no oxygen in his brain. Like, you just don't really know.
Well, that's what's interesting about that Perfect Shot book, is it talks about lions and other dangerous game, and the importance of making the first shot as effective as possible, because the dangerous game hunting has a much higher risk of being attacked and the hunter being harmed. And like I said, we're going for impala and gemsbok and the more of the low speed African hunting type stuff, but it's the same concept. And I think it's cool that there are people that are trying to push that boundary in the training industry more, to try to get people more. The people that are coming to the courses are getting things that they hadn't thought about in a mountain of standing, shooting, flat cardboard, squared away targets.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from the performance training side. You need those hard skills to a certain degree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you probably need a relatively high development of those before you get too far into the weeds on other stuff. Because you've got to be able to hit what you're aiming at.
Correct.
But the other stuff matters too. Like, it really does. You know what? So one of the things I loved about your book was your use of data and how you talked about things, right? And you've got that famous automaticity chart in your book.
Right. And that was John Rhen and Gabe White that came up with that, and they kindly let me use it. But I've dived into that. John Rhen is a very good friend, and we correspond all the time. And I went and added more drills to his chart. But yeah, I think that's really critical, the automaticity part of it. And here's how I explain that stuff to my students. I say, look, I'm going to hand you a tenor saxophone, and I'm going to teach you to play the C major scale on the tenor saxophone. And you've never touched the saxophone before. At the end of 2 days, you can probably play the C major scale on the tenor saxophone. And maybe we even put a time limit on it so that you have to go da 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 da. Maybe you can play it that fast. Probably at the end of 2 days, you won't be able to, right? But you can play it. Okay. You don't own that skill. You've rented that skill for the weekend. If I come back to your house and 2 o'clock in the morning, I roust you out of bed a year later for after class, and I put the horn in your hand and I say, you've got to play a C major scale on the tenor saxophone with no mistakes, and you've got a minute, go, right? How many of those people that haven't touched the horn between the 2-day weekend seminar and the time that I'm there saying you got to perform this skill on demand under time pressure, realistically, maybe that helps people understand the analogy. But it's, the automaticity is critical. You have to have drawing the gun from concealment, getting it on the target quickly enough is a critical skill. Being able to hit stuff, certainly in the 3 to 7 yard range, and hit smaller targets. I prefer a 6x6 square box or a 6x7x8 trapezoid, or a 5-inch circle, a 5.5-inch B8 bullseye circle. I prefer all those things to the 8-inch IDPA or the 6x11 USPSA box. We use smaller targets in our classes for higher accountability, and I think that's important. That's one weakness of competition shooting, is the target areas are still probably too big.
Yeah, they're very generous.
And that's to make it fun for people that aren't good at shooting, to not make it so soul crushing. For if we replaced all the A zones on every target with the B8 center, and the only time you got an A zone hit or a down zero is if you hit the black center on the B8 bullseye, which, now that I'm saying that, might show up in one of my summer matches now that we're no longer USPSA format. I might have a whole bunch of targets where that's the A zone hit and everything else is down something. That all of a sudden things begin to change.
Well, and it's a pace change, right? Like, it's not, assuming someone has developed the proper skills, and they are able to shoot accurately. That's one of the things that I think people misunderstand about competition style shooting. Is it's not that you don't need to be very accurate, it's that you need to be very accurate going very fast. And those are two competing goals.
Correct.
So most people have to loosen up the accuracy in order to be able to go that fast, which in terms of a training paradigm is just fine. But that's different than the application paradigm that we talked about earlier, right?
Right.
And I think one of the hardest things for people to do with shooters, and one of the hardest things for me, is to develop this really robust mental transmission where I can shift gears based on the type of shooting, how big my obstacle scoring zone is, how big my acceptable scoring zone is, how far away are the targets, what's the risk on the targets, how many no shoots are there, what are my penalties for not making it.
One of our 4-hour courses in the program, that's all it talks about. It's beyond the basics, and it's all about gear shifting and adjusting shooting cadence based on the difficulty and the size of the target. Yeah. And so we spend a whole 4 hours of our program just going over practicing that one skill, which literally doesn't exist in the average. The 99% people, the gun owners, carry permit level owners, they shoot every shot like it's a 7-yard shot. So they're slow at 3 yards and they're too fast at 15 yards.
Yeah.
And they've never considered that there's speed to shooting. And so that class, and there's many other courses that cover it. I'm not unique in that. I didn't invent it. But at some point in somebody's development as a shooter, they need to learn that concept, and it needs to happen sooner than later in their growth.
Yeah, I agree. And I think getting people, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I think getting people to understand that what makes the pace faster or slower is how refined their sight picture and trigger press has to be.
Correct.
Because people think about faster or slower, and they do the same things faster or slower.
Correct.
That's not really the right answer either.
I use the CERT guns with the red and green lasers.
Okay.
And in the classroom, I have 10 of the CERT guns, which was a big investment. However, the teaching value is significant, that we work on teaching the students to manipulate the trigger differently at different speeds. Right. Tom Gibbons has his words. He has carefully, quickly, and precisely. Right. And when I teach them quickly, they plow all the way through the trigger, not stopping. There's no take up. There's no slack. You're off the trigger. You press the trigger straight through all the way to the shot. And that works for anything that's a quick shot, 3 to 5, 7 yards, maybe depending on their skill. Then we teach them carefully. And how we do that is we have them take the slack out so they can see the red laser on the cert. And then they press through to make the green. So every shot has a slack and a press. And it may not always require that. I know there's guys that don't like to teach taking the slack out or even being aware of the slack, and I'm okay with that. But it helps people understand that if they'll take the slack out, verify the sights, and then finish the trigger press, generally that gets them where I want them to go on speed. Then the precisely, they take up the slack, but then the speed that they go from red to green on the cert pistol, the speed is now press and not press.
Yep.
And so we work on with the cert guns with the visual feedback from the lasers. And what that lets them do is they see how much the gun moves when they take the take-up laser out. On the last two modes, they without looking at the sights, they can actually look at the red dot on the target. And we use different size spots on the target that your red ball has to stay inside that small area to guarantee that the gun isn't moving very much when you're pressing the trigger. And acceptable gun movement for a carefully shot is different from acceptable gun movement for a precisely shot. And I've found that as far as and again, I hate to sound like I'm some unique guy, but I'm the only one I've seen teach it this way, but it seems to get people understanding what they need to do better than going out on the range and doing it with ammo. When they understand, they see what's happening with the gun movement with the lasers on the cert guns, and they understand by application moving the trigger and doing all that offline with no noise and no recoil. I get better results when they come to the firing line and we shoot the same drills than they at least have done it correctly in the classroom with the cert gun before we put the ammo in the guns. And we've just started doing that the last couple of years since I invested in all additional cert pistols. But huge fan of that particular device for training because it gives insight into gun movement and trigger manipulation in a way that nothing else I've found can. And so that's free bonus training tip for anybody that watches the podcast. If you don't have a cert pistol, code KRT10 you can use for a small discount. And my deal is, okay, you buy the $200 one. Well, that's like pulling the trigger on 1,000 live rounds of 9mm. So once you pull the trigger on the cert gun 1,000 times, it's paid for. If you get a fancier one, okay, well then it's 2,000 trigger presses before you break even. But once you break even, then you have a training tool you can use at home that does multiple shots and gives you valuable information. And so I think instead of thinking, well, this is taking away from my live ammo budget, it's that it's allowing you to do some types of training that you can't do with live ammo, and you can do it at home with no range, and you can work more frequently on your dry fire program. I think there's tremendous benefits to that. So of all the gadgets that are out there right now, the cert is the one that I'm pushing the most for people to invest in, because I think it has the most value for developing basic skills as well as advanced skills.
And as far as like the finance kind of perspective on it, that's kind of how I looked at that virtual training setup with the ACE. Like I've pressed the trigger so many times, and that is more than paid for itself many times over, without a doubt. The trigger presses, it's always interesting to me, the commonality between instructors, even if the verbiage is different. Like I call it a slap, a rolling break, and a prep and press. And it's exactly the same three things you just described.
You bet.
It's the exact same.
And with the cert, they can see it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is they can see it in a way that they're not going to see, because they can see the red and the green lasers, right? If it's a rolling break, then they see red and green all in one continuous movement of the trigger. Whereas if they stop and pause, then they can continue. People seem to get it better instead of words, the visual information, and then also you can put your finger on top of theirs and you can drive the trigger for them. The old Larry Mudgett trigger drills that he came up with 30, 40, 50 years ago, maybe. That method of teaching is super valuable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, they make a big deal about learning styles, right? People that are more visual learners, people that are more kinesthetic learners, all of those things. But to be honest, I think that no matter what your particular learning style is, you need all of the different approaches to truly learn.
Oh, absolutely.
I just think that just makes more sense.
I can stand next to a student and I can say, start moving your finger when I say the P in press and keep moving it until the S in press. And they can work on press, press, or press, press. When I watch them, they're all going now, 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 now on the trigger. And until I put my finger on top of theirs and I drive the trigger the speed that I want it driven, they don't, very commonly, they don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get it. Or they'll take up the slack, and they'll take up the slack at a snail's pace. So they'll go slack, press, right? So they're taking up the slack really slow and then still yanking. Or they start rolling the trigger, and as they get close to the shot breaking, they accelerate to the end. And so it's not, like you say, a rolling break. It's rolling downhill with rapid velocity, and they blow it in the last 10% of the trigger press. But
it's an avalanche instead of
yes
approach.
And so until I put my finger on top of theirs and I say, look, it needs to feel like this, roll all the way through. And then all of a sudden you can see the light bulb come on and they go, oh, where they won't get it with me doing this with my trigger finger, showing them with the cert, or explaining it with words or any other method. But when you put your finger on top of theirs and you actually, this is what it feels like to do this correctly. Because I only have 4 hours at a time with students, I've had to become ruthlessly efficient with what gets me to the right answer for them as quickly as possible. I don't have 2 days of them, 2 days with them for them to finally work it out. They got to get it. They got to get it like right now. And so I've had to try everything in the world to figure out what gets them to the right point that I want them in the least amount of time with the simplest explanation. And I think that's a challenge for trainers that are used to teaching longer courses. If you challenge yourself and you say, I only have an hour to teach this person how to do this thing, then you have to figure out how to do it efficiently and get the message across to everybody as best you can. And that's a lot of trainers have the luxury of longer programs, and that then they don't necessarily, they can be inefficient with the way they do things.
Well, and I think going back to like the cert pistol, right? And so I had a cert pistol for a long time. I don't really use one anymore. And for a while, I even took the battery out because I didn't want to be looking at the laser. But
that's a training scar that happens.
But that was after I'd used it in some of the ways you're talking about. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is I think that it's very easy for people at a certain skill level who got there through solely traditional dry fire to dismiss all of these training tools like the ACE and CERT and everything else as unnecessary, because I didn't need that. You know what I mean? Like, Tim, that's quite cool what they're saying. Well, I didn't need that, and I'm a GM or I'm a national champion or whatever else. You can do it all through conventional dry fire. Yes, you can. But the learning curve to even know what you're looking at in traditional dry fire is pretty lengthy. Like, it takes a while before you're actually looking at what the sights are doing the right way in dry fire. And it takes a significant amount of live rounds to get that experience and get to that point. Whereas some of these things can kind of help you understand what you're looking for.
Sorry, my dog is scratching and his leg is thumping on the desk. If you're hearing a thump, thump, thump.
No worries. No worries there. You know what I'm saying? Like, it helps you understand what you need to be looking at when you're a dry fire, which is hard for a lot of people. Like, it's difficult at first.
Part of it is aptitude. Some people, and my other life, I play music for money. I'm on track this year to play like 140 shows, and periodically I'll get people to ask me, well, do you teach lessons in music? Well, I don't. And it's because I started playing music when I was like 5, and I've got perfect or near perfect pitch, which means if you sing a note, I can tell you what note it is plus or minus a half step. And I have friends, some of the guys I play with are even better than that. And there are awarenesses and abilities that people that have really good vision, for example, there are guys that shoot that have naturally 2010 vision where they can see the holes in the target at 25 yards, right? And they don't realize that other people can't. The most classic example is Jelly Bryce, whose vision was so good that he could see the 38 caliber bullets streaking down range like most people see paintballs or airsoft pellets, right? And he didn't understand that other people couldn't do that, right? And so something I'm proud of about my own training is I'm really good at working with the strugglers, the people that don't get it, right? Many trainers just give up on them, right? Well, you can't handle this class. This is not for you. But I get a lot of students I get. The challenge for me is I'm always trying to get the strugglers to catch up and always trying to figure out how can I solve their problem, right? And there's vision issues. There's coordination issues. There are people that can't move their trigger finger without sympathetically moving their thumb.
Yep.
Because of a lifetime of gripping things like this. And every time they work the trigger, the thumb moves in sympathy. And that's a problem. Some people, you can tell them, hey, quit doing that, and they'll quit doing that. And other people, they're not going to quit doing that. And so we may have to change their grip. I may have to stand there and literally hold their thumb. You know, I hold the thumb on the side of the pistol and make them work the trigger on the SIRT gun without moving their thumb. And they've never done that before ever in their life. And the idea that you would do this without doing this, there's things that you learn working with strugglers that you're never going to learn working with performance pistol students. And not to, okay, maybe a little bit to denigrate the guys that teach performance pistol class. There is nothing easier to do in the firearms training world than teach ultra high motivated people who are already at a moderately good skill level to get them to go faster and do better, right? If you're a GM teaching C and B class shooters who already shoot matches and already dry fire and already train and already do stuff, the sort of problems you're going to fix for them are relatively easy problems to solve, and you know they're going to put the work in to fix it. When you've got an elderly person with 50 pounds of grip strength trying to shoot a double action 38 revolver who can't focus on the front sight because their vision is poor, you know, then the answer is not, well, guns aren't for you. You've got to come up with solutions for them. They may have to put a laser grip on their gun. They may need a semi-auto with a red dot. They may need a 380 instead of a 38. They may need a 22 instead of anything center fire, right? And so it's the strugglers are where the real challenge are as a trainer. I think that's where the real interesting things happen. And that forces you to learn to do things and explain things in ways that don't make sense because you can't imagine, well, why can't you see that? Why can't you feel that? Right? It's like me trying to train somebody with no rhythm that can't hear pitch to play music. It's like, well, can't you hear that note's out of tune? Can't you hear that string's out of tune on the guitar? Right? Can't you hear that you're not even in sync at all with the music? If you have certain natural abilities, it's easier.
Yes.
It's just easier. And the people that get really good at stuff almost always, invariably, have things are easy for them, and that's why they continue on forward. And the people that are struggling with it, they're the ones least motivated to continue. And like I said, I think to me, I find it a challenge to work with the strugglers. That's actually the talk I'm going to give next year at TACCon is going to be all about coaching strugglers and trying to share more of those tips. Because so many people that come to TACCon are trainers. It's not all trainers, but there's a lot of people there that are instructors. And I don't see a lot of other people teaching those things in you're not going to learn how to help a struggler in a performance pistol class. You're going to learn how to train yourself to get better, which is great. You're going to learn how to coach the high motivated person with high quality gear and willing to dry fire all the time. You know, they're easy to teach. That's the easiest money to make. And conveniently, those people are the highest motivated, so they're willing to spend the money to go to the classes. So it's a nice little insular bubble of high motivated people teaching being taught by high motivated trainers, you know, and that's all good. It's all good. Don't get me wrong. That I've taken those classes, I've taught those classes. But I think the bigger challenge in all that is if you're a performance pistol instructor used to teaching really competent people, can you teach someone that's really way at the back of the pack, the worst shooter in the academy, right? From a law enforcement perspective, those are the people that really need the attention, because God forbid you're on hot call and somebody shows up and that's your backup is the worst shooter in the academy that made the 70.0001 just barely on the third try. That's so I get more sympathy from my approach from law enforcement trainers than I do from private sector trainers, because the law enforcement people are living that. They live that every day. That's their job.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I actually, for a while, I was a recruit firearms instructor for Chicago. So I remember those days.
So you've lived that way.
Yeah, and you have to try to get everybody at least to a level of competence. And it's
Correct.
Sometimes more challenging with some people than others.
Correct.
And I think there's an all too willing dismissal on the part of a lot of firearms instructors saying that they're simply not motivated. But that's not always the case. Sometimes people have coordination issues and visual acuity. Not necessarily is their vision 20/20. It's how rapidly can their brain process visual input.
Or they just need to see it correctly once.
To understand what they're looking at.
They haven't done it correctly once. They haven't seen it. They haven't understood what correct is. I have to give tremendous respect and admiration to my buddy Eric Weiss with Austin PD. They all of their trainees now are running red dots. Everyone on APD carries an M&P with an aim-point acro. And one of the things that they started allowing people to do with the M&Ps is remove all of the grip panels and wrap the gun with hockey tape. And that solved gun fit issues for people that had short fingers.
Yeah, I can see that.
The M&P platform, better than most, is small hand friendly when you remove everything. With the Glock, and I like Glock is fine, but you can't get a Glock 19 to be as skinny or Glock 17, the trigger reach on the Glock, because you can't peel everything off of it down to like the point like you can with the M&P. And so by allowing better adjustment for hand size, I've got an old friend of mine who works for a unnamed police department in Tennessee. He's got really small hands and short fingers, and they require that they carry a red dot on the pistol. Well, he can't reach the trigger on the pistol without twisting it in his hand so it recoils over his thumb knuckle. Well, when you're trying to find the red dot, that means it doesn't naturally line up. Right? He's having to compensate in two areas because they won't allow a grip reduction on the Glocks that they carry because it's against policy.
Yeah.
Even though it handicaps his ability to, with a skinny gun, he shoots great. With the fat gun that they mandate that he carry, then he has to grip it suboptimally, and now trying to learn to find the red dot on a rapid presentation, the gun doesn't index properly because it doesn't fit him in his hand correctly. And so he's having to learn how to compensate for two impediments to work around those. It's like, yeah, you can train around it and get to the point that you can make it work, but it's like, well, why, other than we've always done it this way or that's our policy. So like I said, some departments are better than others on those things.
Oh, absolutely. And that whole dictating firearm size, when you have a population of employees that have widely disparate hand sizes, physical structures.
Yeah.
I never really understood that. It just makes no sense. But so let's do this real quick. How can people get a hold of you? What's your website? How can they come train with you? Where are you located at? Let people know where they can come get good, solid training from you. And then you bring in a lot of outside instructors too. So let's talk about that.
Okay. So my range is 1 hour east of Austin. It's 1 hour from College Station. It's 2 hours from Houston, Waco, and San Antonio. As I joke, it's central to all and convenient to none. However, we are far enough out in the country that we have stayed open as a training facility for the last 22 years, where rapid growth, particularly from Austin, continues to advance and shut down most outdoor ranges. So yeah, you got to drive a little bit to get to me. But we run classes every weekend. I run my own in-house classes on the weekends. For those that want to travel to come see me, my advice would be the last weekend of October. I'm running a force-on-force instructor class on Friday, which is how to design and run force-on-force scenarios. That's with red guns, cert guns, airsoft guns, simunition guns. It's the skill of developing scripting scenarios and running them, which is a course that very few people offer and very few trainers participate in or attempt to do for their students, which I think is a tragedy, given that mostly we make mistakes making decisions and not shooting our guns. We need more training in making decisions, and learning how to run scenarios, I think, is the critical step. Then Saturday, that weekend, we run 8 hours of force on force scenarios, a mix of red gun, airsoft gun, simunition gun scenarios. Then Sunday afternoon, we do a live fire class, and Sunday night, we do a low light shooting course. So someone that wants to travel could come do a 3-day or a 2-day weekend with me and get that sort of information as a guest, coming from further than Central Texas area. That would be the sweet spot. The website is krtraining.com. I have a blog.krtraining.com, and that's where I publish articles about whatever interests me: the history of handgun training, shooting old drills, modern trends, different things that I think are good, insights that I have into different topics. All those things, you can go to blog.krtraining.com and find that. I post occasionally on Instagram. We have a Facebook page for the business, KR Training Texas, and I post a lot of stuff there. I don't make a lot of videos. I'm sorry, I just don't ever have time to make videos. I try to go on podcasts, other people's podcasts. Again, don't know time to make a podcast because I'm usually on the range teaching people. I teach a ton of private lessons during the week, and people that want to come do a private lesson, I do 2 and 4 hour blocks at my range, private training, and I do more of those lately than I have in the past. And so that's all good. In terms of guest instructors, let's see, I have Greg Elfritz coming in a couple of weeks, but that's already sold out. I have Gabe White coming in June. There's plenty of room in that. I have Matt Little. I don't know who that guy is, but
what is that guy know?
I don't know. But I'm hosting Matt Little for his 2-day pistol class in July. I am bringing Greg Elfritz back for a 2-day knife instructor course in August. Then he's coming back a third time for his the explosive threat, which is a terrorist bombing related class, and then a 1-day grid down wound care course. And I'm hosting Greg a lot this year because Greg's health is rapidly declining, and he's trying to pass on information to people as much as he can before he's unable to teach more. And he lives in Austin, so I basically told Greg, I will host you for as many classes as you want to teach at my facility while you're still able, because I think it's important. Greg's a tremendous trainer with a ridiculous amount of experience and knowledge, and passing down his information. I think anybody that if he isn't at the top of your list of people that you should train with this year, you're wrong, because when he's gone, we're going to miss him terribly. And unfortunately, it's probably, I don't know, maybe a couple of years that he's got left with his health situation. And so I think it's, I regret not training with other people in that situation. When they got there, I didn't make the effort to go and catch like Pat Rogers and people like that. I think it's important to get with the old guys while they're still around. Let's see, who else am I hosting? In September, I'm hosting John Holshin for one of his very rare neuro-based decision-making courses. Then in October, I'm hosting Chuck Pressburg for No Fail Pistol, and I'm hosting Tom Givens for one of his many instructor-level classes. Oh, and Steve Moses from Palisades Training for a couple of church security-related courses as well. So we're hosting a lot of people this year and teaching a lot of classes ourselves.
I definitely need to try to get in on John's class. I need to hang out with John again.
It's only 12 slots and they're filling up. So
yeah, no, I need to grab one. I wanted to say something about the knife class. This is another thing that I think, just like the combatives, the hand combatives, and like the entangled gunfight, people don't put enough emphasis on that. I really recommend everybody do a fair amount of knife work, if for no other reason than to understand how big a threat someone with a knife in the settings is.
Oh yeah.
Because people really underestimate that. It is not a simple situation to handle. And you're probably not going to come out of it unscathed.
No.
It is a lot worse than people think. So even if you never plan on carrying a knife for self-defense, I really recommend everybody should take, who's interested in self-defense, should take at least one knife class. Like I said, if no other reason than to understand the threat.
Yeah, and there's a lot of overlap between close quarter shooting and close quarter knife stuff. If they're close enough to cut you with a knife, they're close enough to grab you. So it's that whole 0 to 5 foot weapon retention, weapon disarm, knife, mixing of empty hand and gun skills, all of that stuff. It's all valuable. Like I said, Greg's teaching his close quarters shooting instructor class in June, and then he's teaching the knife course, knife instructor class in August. And I'm offering in July, I am doing a 1-day close quarter shooting class that's based on Greg's material.
Okay, cool.
Since I've already taken his close quarter instructor's class and the material a couple of times. So we're gonna start offering that more often.
Well, for everybody who's tuned into this, if you have the opportunity, if you're anywhere in Texas, I feel like coming to Texas, and you want to come train with Karl, definitely do it. I've spent a fair amount of time out there at your range now, and I really enjoy it. There's a great, it's not just that Karl's a great instructor, there's a great core group of people that train and teach out there. And everybody's intelligent, everybody's motivated, everybody is looking at the right things, trying to solve problems in ways that make sense in the real world. And that's nice to see. So it's just a great group.
We train with our carry guns, we train from concealment. You're not going to see plate carriers, you're not going to see battle belts. We train with real stuff, and we try to make it very much in context. So we challenge your brain to make good decisions, even if it's a live fire drill. We're trying to build your brain to think the right things and have the right responses.
Yep, and that matters. That's a very important part of the skill set to develop stuff, without a doubt. It's not always just about shooting paper fast and accurate. There's more to it than that.
Right.
So I really appreciate you coming on. The class that I'm teaching out there is, I believe, July 12th and 13th. So anybody who's interested, I believe that
it's the weekend after the 4th of July.
Yeah. And there's a couple of slots left, but it's filling up too. So people want to get in on it, they should get in. And I'm looking forward to it.
Save me a slot because I'm going to take it.
You have the range slot, so you're good there.
Great.
We don't have to worry about that.
I may, depending on the curriculum, I may challenge myself and take it either left-handed or with some weird gun that I don't like to shoot very much, just to build my skills up. I think that's good for instructors. I've got a Taurus G3. I may take the class with the Taurus, which isn't a very bad gun. It's not really a handicap, but maybe I'll find something even worse something that's even harder to shoot, and challenge myself. I'm not a fan of the double single style guns. Maybe I'll pull out my old 1980s Smith & Wesson double single gun and see what I can do with that.
Oh, those things are like bricks.
Yeah, they're terrible. But the deal is, I get students that show up with guns that I would never recommend they buy. And that's another one of those working with strugglers is, well, I need to be able to pick up their gun and shoot it left-handed, shoot whatever they've got, and pass my own tests. So we'll see. I might get tired of it, the struggle, and switch back to the gun that I like shooting. But Masad Ayoub's the one that got me turned on to that idea that if you're taking a class that's probably below your existing skill level, challenge yourself to make it challenging in a relevant way.
It's we're doing skill development, so I do think that in the curriculum you would just be fine shooting your regular gun as well, because there's certainly ways to challenge yourself there, because it's very much about speed and accuracy combined. You know what I mean?
Right.
The first day is most of the stuff to get out of the way about how to run the trigger and how to manipulate the gun and all that.
Right.
The second day we do a lot of movement. We've got a drill that I think you'll really like called Calvin Ball. You know Les Martoni, right? Or
I know who he is.
Yeah, Les invented this drill, and it's one of my favorite drills to use a topic we brought up earlier for interleaving training, and I'll show you how that applies.
Awesome.
When we do it, but it's a good time.
We'll see. I'll probably make the decision about what gun I'm going to run probably the morning of the class, and
all right.
We'll see how it goes. And conveniently, since it's at my range and my gun safe is right inside the building, if I'm suffering too much, I might relent. But I don't know. I'm liking the idea of challenging myself to shoot something that's not the easy button,
Well, and you're certainly good enough to do that and handle it. It's not like that's an issue. So but I'm looking forward to teaching out there. I'm hoping that some of the regulars are in the class. Like Zoe's trained with me before, but I'd love it if he hops back in. Just I like Zoe. He's a good guy.
I have been so fortunate in the last 5 years. I get people that show up, they take a class, they're good shooters, and they're like, well, I would really like to help you teach these classes. And so my instructor cadre mostly consists of, it's sort of like I'm a giant Velcro ball and I roll down the hill, and some people stick to me. And I don't ever post a job. I don't ever advertise. I don't tell people that I'm looking for assistance. People come and they volunteer themselves to say, well, I would like to come and help. And they start out helping for free. And those that get good enough and familiar enough with my curriculum, then some of them get paid. But others are just happy to come out and learn how to teach better by helping others. We had 7 instructors teaching a group of 18 beginners last weekend.
Oh, that's nice. That's a great student-teacher ratio.
And people that mostly had never shot a gun before. And that was a lot of my interns and people that are learning, because the best way to get experience teaching others is to go teach others. And the best way to do that is under the tutelage of somebody that, or multiple people that teach others. So you're going to learn to be a better trainer, not by going out and teaching by yourself with no mentor, but the mentoring of others, I think, is something that we're putting a lot of effort into. And the nice thing with that happens is, like this weekend, Zoe is going to teach as a lead trainer for a class that I'm not available to teach. And so we can run more classes and help more people with more qualified staff. So we're unique in that regard, that very few traveling trainers have assistants. They don't come with, it's like, well, I'm going to fly in and I'm going to teach 24 people by myself, and I'll take my suitcase full of $100 bills home at the end of the weekend. I'm not sure that always benefits the students as much as having a team of people that you can run multiple things in parallel in smaller groups and more attention.
Well, and you've got a great team too. Like you got Zoe, you got Dave Rychek, you've got like some really good shooters and really good people out there running that. That's always good to see for sure. I'm telling you guys, I recommend KNR training a lot. If you get a chance, check it out. It would not hurt my feelings if the time people take a chance on it would be July 12th or 13th. That would be nice too. But definitely come out for something for us, for sure. Check out his book. I've got it. It's a great book on training. So definitely well worth the read.
If you want a copy autographed by both authors, you can order it direct from us at KR Training, or you can order it ebook on Amazon, or you can get the unsigned print copy on Amazon. It's all good. We make a little more money if you buy the signed print copy direct from us. But you just want to have it right now and you want to have it digital, just grab it on Amazon.
Yeah, I know it's definitely worth putting in your shooting library. Well, thanks for coming on, my friend. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No, you gave me a couple things. Every time we talk, you give me a couple things to think about. And I think that's why I value our friendship. I like having the intellectual challenge. Things that don't necessarily.
I feel for the best. I try to gather as many ideas as I can, and somebody has a good idea, I'm quick to try to incorporate it into my own stuff. And that's the curriculum we teach now isn't what we were teaching 5 years ago. Nobody that's good can say that. Everybody's changing their curriculum and adapting as they go. And interaction with other trainers is the best way to stay sharp and to come up with new ideas.
Oh, absolutely. I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I'll try to get Karl back on so we can keep going down the rabbit hole, because I don't think we even came close to exhausting topics to talk about. I think we could go on for quite some time. I will see everybody soon. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Way is in Training. Please come back again as we explore how training makes us better at our craft and better in our everyday lives. See all of you soon.